Today, I will tell you a story that happened not so long ago, about 60 years ago, in a time before the world was entangled in the invisible web of the internet. A time when people fell asleep without glowing screens and without sleep stories. Yet, I assure you, their lives were anything but boring. Tonight, we will slow down time. We will walk alongside a man named Thomas through a single, ordinary week in a bustling city in the 1960s. We will remember how it felt to wait, to listen, and to simply be present. Monday, the commute and the office. The heavy wooden door clicks shut behind him, and Thomas steps out onto the limestone stoop, pulling his wool coat tight against the morning chill. The city in the 60s sounds like a symphony of moving parts. The rhythmic clatter of the electric streetcar as it rounds the corner, the hiss of pneumatic brakes, and the distant, melodic ringing of a bicycle bell. He walks to the station, his leather soles striking the pavement with a steady, confident beat. He stops at the corner kiosk, where the vendor knows his face, and exchanges a heavy copper coin for a pack of peppermint gum. Inside the streetcar, it is quiet. There is no glow of screens, only the soft rustle of newspapers and the low, steady hum of people murmuring about the morning headlines. Thomas watches the city slide past the glass, a blur of brick buildings, tail fins on colorful sedans, and shopkeepers sweeping their front walks. At his office, the drafting room is a sanctuary of precision. He hangs his head on the brass peg and sits at his high, slanted wooden desk. The room smells of cedarwood shavings, graphite, and the faint, sharp scent of ammonia from the blueprint machine. He spends his morning in silence, bent over a large sheet of thick, cream-colored vellum. He uses a silver drafting pen, dipping it carefully into a bottle of deep black India ink. Every line he draws is permanent, a testament to his steady hand and his unwavering focus. The only sounds are the scratching of his pen, the sliding of the wooden T-square across the board, and the soft, rhythmic ticking of the large regulator clock on the wall. Time here is measured in ink and angles, not in seconds and notifications. For lunch, he walks to the diner on the corner. He sits at the chrome counter, where the air is thick with the smell of fried onions and malted milkshakes. He orders a sandwich, and instead of checking a device, he simply watches the people passing by the large window, wondering about their stories and where the afternoon will take them. As the sun dips behind the skyline, casting long, violet shadows across the avenue, Thomas returns home. The streetlights flicker to life, glowing with a warm, soft yellow hue that reflects off the damp pavement. Inside his apartment, he does not turn on the television. Instead, he walks to his small mahogany desk in the corner of the living room. He pulls out a sheet of heavy, linen stationery and unscrews the cap of his fountain pen. He is writing a letter to his brother, who lives 3 states away. He describes the weather, the progress on his latest architectural drawing, and the quiet beauty of the city at dusk. He knows it will take 3 days for this paper to reach its destination, and another 3 for a response to return. There is a profound peace in this delay. He doesn't expect an immediate answer, so his mind is free from the anxiety of waiting. The silence of the room is absolute, broken only by the scratch of his nib against the paper, and the occasional, distant siren of a fire truck somewhere in the dark heart of the city. He seals the envelope, pressing a stamp onto the corner with his thumb. It is a physical act, a message given weight and form. He will drop it in the blue metal mailbox on the corner tomorrow morning, letting it begin its slow, certain journey through the world. Before bed, he sits in his armchair, the one with the worn velvet upholstery. He turns on the radio, a large wooden box that hums as the vacuum tubes warm up. He tunes the dial through bursts of static and crackle until he finds a station playing soft, late night jazz. The trumpet notes are smooth, like silk in the air. He sits there in the dim light, just listening. He isn't doing anything else. He isn't multitasking. He is simply listening to the music, letting the melody wash over him as the city settles into a deep, analog sleep. He turns off the lamp, the click of the switch echoing in the quiet room. He climbs into bed, pulled into a dreamless rest by the weight of the day and the comforting, steady tick of the clock on the wall. Tuesday, the site visit and the blueprint. Tuesday morning finds Thomas away from his desk, standing on a busy street corner where a new department store is rising from the dust. He wears a sturdy tan canvas jacket and carries a heavy leather tube slung over his shoulder, containing the plans he labored over just yesterday. The air here is thick with the scent of wet concrete, hot tar, and the sharp, metallic tang of welding sparks. He watches as the massive steel girders are hoisted into the sky by a giant, clanking crane. The operators communicating through simple hand signals and the sharp blasts of a whistle. Thomas unrolls a large blueprint, the paper snapping loudly in the wind. He weighs down the corners with smooth, heavy stones found near the foundation. He compares the white lines on the deep blue paper to the reality of the iron skeletons before him. There is no tablet to zoom in, no digital model to rotate, only the physical map of his imagination, translated into ink. He pulls a folding wooden rule from his pocket, its joints clicking as he extends it to check the spacing of the window frames. He moves with a quiet, deliberate precision, marking his observations in a small, leather-bound notebook with a thick, soft pencil. voices echoing off the brick walls of the neighboring buildings. It is a loud, raw, and honest environment. Thomas feels a deep sense of satisfaction, seeing his quiet lines at the office turn into something heavy, cold, and permanent, right before his eyes. By mid-afternoon, he stops at a hardware store on his way back. The shop is narrow and dim, filled from floor to ceiling with wooden drawers and the heavy, oily smell of machine parts. He buys a small box of brass screws, the shopkeeper weighing them on a heavy cast iron scale and wrapping them in a piece of brown, recycled paper. The evening is cool, and after a simple meal, Thomas decides to walk to the public library. He needs to research the structural properties of a specific type of limestone for his next project. In this world, information does not live in his pocket. It lives in a magnificent stone building with high, vaulted ceilings. Inside, the silence is so thick it feels like a physical presence. The only sounds are the soft, rhythmic thud of a librarian's rubber stamp and the distant, muffled cough of a student in the corner. The air is dry, smelling of old paper, glue, and the faint, sweet scent of floor wax. Thomas walks to the card catalog, a massive wooden chest filled with hundreds of small, narrow drawers. He pulls one out, the wood sliding smoothly against wood. He flips through the yellowed cards, his fingers dancing over the typed letters, searching for a single call number. He finds the book, a heavy cloth-bound volume from the 1930s. He carries it to a long, oak table, lit by a single lamp with a green, glass shade. He spends the next hour taking notes by hand, his pen moving slowly across the page. He has to read every word, to search through the index, to truly engage with the knowledge. When he leaves, the moon is high, casting a silver glow over the library's stone steps. He walks home through the quiet residential streets, listening to the muffled sounds of families behind closed doors, the flickering blue light of a distant television, and the soft, rhythmic barking of a dog blocks away. Back in his apartment, he spends a few moments at the window, watching the quiet, rhythmic blinking of a neon sign on the next block. He feels a sense of accomplishment. He hasn't been distracted by 1,000 voices. He has followed one thought from the building site to the library, and now to its completion in his mind. He winds his watch, the small metallic clicks marking the end of the day. He feels the weight of the silence, a heavy, comforting blanket that prepares him for sleep. The city is still, the lights are dimming, and the world waits patiently for Wednesday to arrive. Wednesday, the barber and the ritual. Wednesday morning brings a light rain, a steady, rhythmic drumming on the windows of the drafting room, Thomas decides to take a longer lunch break, stepping out into the misty air to visit the neighborhood barber shop. The shop is marked by a spinning red and white pole, a small, hypnotic splash of color against the gray stone buildings. Inside, the air is warm and heavy with the scent of peppermint, talcum powder, and the sharp, clean smell of barbicide. Thomas hangs his coat on a chrome hook and waits his turn, listening to the rhythmic snip, snip, snip of the scissors. There are no magazines to distract him, only the low, steady murmur of the radio, playing an instrumental version of a popular ballad. He climbs into the heavy-nosed porcelain and leather chair, the vinyl cool against his neck. The barber, a man with steady hands and a crisp white smock, wraps a hot, steaming towel around Thomas's face. The heat is intense, but it forces him to close his eyes, to let go of the blueprints and the angles, and to simply breathe in the damp, floral scent of the steam. Then comes the sound of the straight razor being stropped against the long leather strap, a rhythmic, slapping sound that echoes in the quiet shop. The barber applies a thick, warm lather with a soft, badger hairbrush. The movement slow and deliberate. The blade moves across his skin with a quiet, rasping sound, removing the weight of the week with every stroke. When the ritual is over, the barber splashes a bit of stinging, citrus-scented aftershave on his cheeks and dusts his neck with a large, fluffy brush covered in fine white powder. Thomas stands up, feeling lighter, sharper, and more connected to the world around him. He steps back out into the rain, the cool droplets feeling fresh on his skin, as he walks back to the office with a renewed, steady pace. In the evening, Thomas walks 3 blocks over to the Green Mill, a local tavern where the windows are fogged from the heat inside, and the neon beer sign flickers with a low, electrical hum. He isn't there for a wild night. He is there to meet his old friend, George, a man he has known since they were boys. Inside, the tavern is a world of dark wood, brass railings, and the thick, heavy smell of pipe tobacco. There are no televisions hanging from the ceiling, no loud music drowning out the voices. People are sitting in high-backed booths, their faces lit by the warm, amber glow of the lamps. Thomas finds George at their usual table in the back, a small candle flickering between them. They order 2 glasses of dark ale, the cool, condensation-covered glass feeling heavy in Thomas's hand. They spend the next 2 hours simply talking. George tells a long, winding story about his weekend trip to the coast, describing the color of the water, the sound of the gulls, and the taste of the salt air. Thomas listens, really listens, his mind painting the picture as George speaks. There is no urge to check the time or to look at a screen. If George pauses to take a sip of his drink, the silence is comfortable, a bridge between thoughts. They discuss the news they both read in the paper 2 days ago, and they talk about the upcoming winter, their voices low and steady, blending into the hum of the room. After a game of darts, the heavy, brass-tipped flights thudding into the corkboard with a satisfying, solid sound, they part ways at the door. Thomas walks home alone, the city night feeling vast and peaceful. The only sound is the rhythmic, distant clanking of a manhole cover as a car drives over it, and the soft, hollow echo of his own footsteps on the sidewalk. Back in his apartment, he pours a small glass of water, the liquid clear and bright in the dim light. He feels a deep sense of connection, not to a network, but to a person, to a place, and to the slow, steady passage of time. He goes to bed feeling full, his mind quiet, as he listens to the distant, muffled whistle of a midnight train. Thursday, the shoe repair and the butcher. Thursday morning, Thomas carries a pair of worn, brown leather shoes wrapped in a piece of old newspaper. He walks to a small basement shop where the sign above the door has long since faded to a dull, elegant gray. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of tanned leather, rubber cement, and the sharp, metallic tang of an old sewing machine. The cobbler, a man with thick, calloused fingers and a heavy leather apron, takes the shoes and examines the soles with a quiet, professional eye. He doesn't look at a computer to check the stock. He simply reaches into a wooden bin and pulls out two thick, sturdy heels of solid rubber. He taps them against the counter with a dull, satisfying thud. Thomas leaves the shoes behind, knowing they will be ready on Saturday, held together by craft and time. He continues his walk to the local butcher shop, where the sawdust on the floor muffles the sound of his footsteps. The butcher, wearing a clean striped apron, is sharpening a long silver knife against a steel rod, a rhythmic, singing sound that echoes through the shop. Thomas buys a single, thick pork chop, which the butcher wraps in several layers of heavy, peach-colored paper, tying it tight with a piece of white string from a spool hanging on the wall. The transaction is simple and human. A few words about the weather, a nod of respect, and a heavy silver coin dropped into the butcher's hand. Thomas walks back to his office, the small, heavy package in his bag, feeling the satisfaction of a world where every item has a face, a name, and a story. In the evening, Thomas treats himself to a visit at the Vinyl Groove, a record store located in a narrow, brick building that always smells faintly of dust and old cardboard. He spends an hour slowly, methodically flipping through the bins, his fingers making a soft, rhythmic twuck, twuck sound as he moves from one album to the next. He is looking for something specific, a recording of a cello suite he heard on the radio last week. He finds it, a heavy, thick disc of black vinyl in a sleeve with a beautiful, hand-drawn illustration of a lonely landscape. He pays for it with a crisp, green bill and carries it home under his arm like a hidden treasure. Back in his quiet apartment, he performs the evening ritual of the bachelor. He turns on his hi-fi system, a large wooden cabinet with glowing amber vacuum tubes that slowly fill the room with a warm electrical hum. He carefully removes the record from its inner paper sleeve, holding it only by the edges to avoid leaving prints on the delicate, spiraling grooves. He places it on the turntable and with a steady hand lowers the silver needle. There is a brief, comforting crackle, a small, rhythmic pop, and then the room is filled with the deep, resonant sound of the cello. He sits in his dark living room, watching the blue, flickering light of the street lamps on the ceiling. He isn't reading, he isn't working. He is simply being moved by the music. The sound is rich, organic, and imperfect. A physical vibration that fills the space between him and the walls. He stays there long after the record ends, the needle clicking softly in the final, empty groove as the city outside continues its slow, rhythmic pulse. Friday, the final line, and the handshake. Friday morning at the office is filled with a quiet, intense energy. Thomas leans over his drafting table, the morning sun catching the dust motes that dance in the air above his blueprint. He is drawing the final, intricate details of a grand entrance, his hand moving with the confidence of a man who knows his craft. The room is silent, save for the occasional, rhythmic scratching of his pen and the distant, muffled sound of a typewriter in the outer office. He carefully cleans his technical pen, wiping the silver nib with a soft, lint-free cloth. He rolls up the massive sheet of vellum, the paper crinkling with a sharp, satisfying sound that signals the end of the work week. He carries the heavy roll to his boss's office, a room that smells of old mahogany and expensive cigar smoke. They don't send an email. They stand together over the desk, looking at the physical lines, their shadows long and steady in the afternoon light. His boss, a man with graying temples and a firm, honest gaze, places a heavy hand on Thomas's shoulder. They shake hands, a solid, meaningful gesture that carries more weight than any digital confirmation. Thomas returns to his desk, tidies his instruments, and feels the tension of the week begin to melt away. He puts on his hat, clicks the office lights off, and steps out into the late afternoon, where the city is already beginning to transform for the weekend. The streets are crowded with people leaving their offices, their faces lit by the warm, orange glow of the setting sun. There is a sense of collective relief, a rhythmic, pulsing movement of the crowd toward the train stations and bus stops. Thomas walks slowly, enjoying the feeling of a finished task and the simple, quiet freedom of a Friday evening in the heart of the city. In the evening, Thomas decides to lose himself in the magic of the silver screen. He walks to the Grand, a cinema with a massive, glowing marquee that spells out the movie titles in the bold, black letters. He buys a ticket from the small, glass-enclosed booth, the heavy, cardboard slip feeling cool in his hand. Inside, the lobby smells of buttery popcorn, floor wax, and the faint, sweet scent of perfume from the waiting crowd. He finds a seat in the middle of the darkened theater, the red velvet cushions soft and yielding. There is a low, steady murmur of voices, the sound of people settling into their seats and rustling their coats. Then, the lights dim, and the heavy cold curtains slide open with a quiet, rhythmic whir. The projector behind him springs to life, a steady mechanical clicking sound that fills the back of the room with a hypnotic beat. The beam of light cuts through the darkness, filled with swirling, dancing particles of dust. On the screen, a black and white world begins to unfold, a story of romance and mystery that everyone in the room is watching together at the exact same moment. There are no distractions. No one is looking at their lap. Every eye is fixed on the flickering light. Thomas laughs when the audience laughs and feels the quiet tension when the music turns dark and sharp. When the movie ends and the lights slowly rise, he walks back out into the cool night air. The city looks different now, more cinematic, more mysterious. He walks home through the neon-lit streets, listening to the distant, rhythmic thumping of music from a basement jazz club and the soft, hollow echo of a taxi driving over a metal bridge. Back in his apartment, he doesn't check for news or messages. He simply holds the memory of the film in his mind as he slowly, peacefully prepares for the first morning of the weekend. Saturday, the new souls and the open market. Saturday morning has no schedule, only the slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock, which Thomas doesn't even glance at. He dresses casually, choosing a soft flannel shirt and his favorite corduroy trousers. He walks back to the basement cobbler shop, the air outside feeling crisp and full of the scent of roasting peanuts from a street cart. The cobbler hands him his shoes, the new rubber heels smelling sharp and clean, the leather polished to a dull, deep shine that reflects the dim light of the shop. Thomas puts them on, feeling the solid, bouncy grip of the new soles as he walks back up the stone steps, his footsteps sounding firm and purposeful on the pavement. He wanders toward the open-air market, a place where the city's heart beats in a chaotic, colorful rhythm. There are no plastic bags, no barcodes, only the heavy wooden crates filled with bright orange carrots, deep green kale, and piles of red apples that smell of the autumn orchards. He moves through the crowd, listening to the shouting of the vendors, the rhythmic, metallic clinking of coins being dropped into tin cans, and the soft, constant rustle of brown paper. He buys a loaf of crusty, sourdough bread, still warm from the oven, the steam rising in a thin, white curl against the cool air. He carries it tucked under his arm, feeling the warmth through his sleeve. A simple, tactile pleasure that belongs only to a Saturday morning. He stops by a flower stall, where the scent of wet carnations and roses is almost overwhelming. He doesn't buy any. He simply stands there for a moment, watching the florist trim the stems with a sharp, silver knife. A quick, rhythmic snip, 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 that sounds like a tiny ticking clock. He feels no urge to hurry, no need to be anywhere else. He is a part of the movement, a single, quiet note in the symphony of the market, breathing in the smells of earth, yeast, and the distant muffled sound of a street musician playing an accordion on the corner. As the evening settles in and the sky turns a deep, bruised purple, Thomas prepares his special weekend meal. He takes the pork chop he bought on Thursday, the paper wrapping now slightly damp and cold. He seasons it with coarse salt and cracked black pepper. The sound of the metal grinder a rhythmic, low growl in the quiet kitchen. He places the meat into a heavy, cast iron skillet, and the room is suddenly filled with a loud, energetic sizzle, a sound that promises comfort and warmth. He cooks slowly, watching the juices bubble and turn a rich, golden brown, his mind focused entirely on the heat, the scent, and the transformation of the food. He eats by the window, the only light coming from a single, yellow candle that flickers softly in the draft. The bread is thick and chewy, the crust crackling loudly between his teeth. Outside, the city is alive with a different energy. The sound of laughter echoing from the street below, the rhythmic, distant thud of a car door closing, and the far-off, muffled wail of a saxophone from a nearby window. He doesn't feel lonely. He feels connected to the life around him in a way that is quiet, steady, and profoundly peaceful. He is an observer, a witness to the slow, analog beauty of the world. After dinner, he steps out onto the metal fire escape, the iron cold and solid beneath his feet. He sits on the top step, leaning his back against the rough, red brick of the building. He watches the lights of the city, thousands of small, flickering stars that mark the homes of people he will never meet, yet who are living their own, quiet stories just like his. He stays there for a long time, listening to the low, steady hum of the city breathing, the occasional, rhythmic clatter of a distant train, and the soft, hollow sound of the wind whistling through the narrow alleyway. He feels the weight of the week finally, completely lift as he prepares for the silence of a Sunday morning. Sunday, the Sunday paper and the long shadows. Sunday morning begins not with a sound, but with a profound, heavy silence that feels like a physical embrace. There are no delivery trucks, no clanging streetcars, only the distant, melodic tolling of church bells that echo between the brick buildings. A rhythmic, silver sound that ripples through the cool air. Thomas lies in bed for a long time, watching the sunlight crawl across the wallpaper, highlighting the fine, intricate patterns of the roses. He doesn't need to be anywhere. He doesn't need to do anything. The world outside is resting, and he is resting with it. He walks to the kitchen, his bare feet silent on the cool linoleum floor. He brews a pot of tea, the water whistling softly, a long, steady note that signals the beginning of his ritual. He retrieves the Sunday edition of the newspaper from the mat, and it is massive, a heavy, thick stack of stories, comics, and advertisements that smells of deep, rich ink and forest pine. He spreads the pages out on the floor of his living room, lying on his stomach as he flips through the colorful Sunday funnies. He laughs quietly at the simple jokes, his fingers becoming stained with the gray dust of the newsprint, a mark of his deep, tactile engagement with the morning. By the afternoon, he walks to the city park, where the grand, ancient oaks are dropping their leaves in a slow, rhythmic dance. He sits on a green wooden bench, watching the families in their Sunday best, the children chasing kites that soar against the pale blue sky, and the old men hunched over chessboards in total, concentrated silence. He listens to the wind rustling through the dry leaves, a crisp, papery sound that feels like the world is whispering its secrets. No one is looking at their hands. No one is distracted. Everyone is simply there, occupying their own small space in the afternoon sun, connected by nothing more than the air they breathe and the light they share. As the evening light turns to a deep, honeyed gold, casting long, elegant shadows across his apartment, Thomas prepares for the return of the week. He takes a long, hot bath, the steam rising in thick, white clouds that smell of cedar soap and comfort. He listens to the rhythmic, muffled dripping of the faucet, a sound that echoes the slow, steady pulse of his own heart. He feels clean, light, and profoundly ready for whatever the morning might bring. He is not mourning the end of his weekend. He is simply finishing a chapter. He stands before his nightstand, performing the final, most important task of the week. He takes his brass alarm clock in his hands, feeling its cold, heavy weight. He turns the key on the back, a rhythmic, mechanical clicking, crick, 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 as he winds the spring tight. This sound is the heartbeat of his life, a promise that time will continue, steady and sure, without the need for signals or waves. He sets the alarm for 6:30, the small, silver bell waiting to call him back to his drafting table and his ink. He climbs into bed, the sheets feeling cool and crisp against his skin. He turns off the lamp, the click of the switch leaving the room in a soft, velvet darkness, broken only by the silver glow of the moon on the floor. He lies there in the absolute, heavy silence of a world without the internet, a world where his thoughts are his own, and the night belongs to him alone. He doesn't need a voice to tell him a story. He doesn't need a screen to lull him to sleep. He has lived every second of his week. He has touched the paper. He has heard the bells, and he has felt the wind. His breathing becomes slow, rhythmic, and deep. He is a part of the city, a part of the history, a part of the long analog dream of the 60s. The clock on the nightstand continues its steady, comforting march. Tick, 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 as Thomas falls into a deep, dreamless sleep, perfectly content and perfectly peacefully alone.